How we doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we're back at it breaking down all the latest news and rumblings throughout the offseason and Mets land here in WardyNYM. And today's edition, that being October 16th, 2025, we have key reporting to get into having to do with MLB insider Robert Murray breaking down potential fits for every single team across Major League Baseball, and for great reason. For those that don't know Murray, he is representing Fansided, and is most certainly in on the know as he breaks news each and every trade deadline and MLB offseason, and who he has in current connection in the New York Mets as best fits to land with the New York Mets are all the more interesting, as we're going to deep dive his reporting and the Mets' current connections to one Munitaka Murakami, Framber Valdez, and yes, Trent Grisham. How do these guys make sense for the New York Mets versus maybe how do they not? And ultimately, which player maybe is most likely for the Mets to land of this group, if not multiple, versus least likely, and a whole lot more Mets land to break down each and every one of you. So all I ask is that you guys hit that like and subscribe on your way, and let me know all your initial reactions, thoughts, and analysis in the comments down below to the following players being linked to the New York Mets, and which ones you hope to see land in Queens, if at all, to any of the following that we're going to break down today. And shout out to our amazing sponsors that make every single show here happen, that being at SeatGeek, that has you covered for all of your ticketing needs. Simply head over there to SeatGeek and utilize my promo code WARDY10 because you're going to get 10% off. Yes, you guessed it, the best ticket options out there today. Whether it's NHL tickets, NFL tickets, NBA season right around the corner, UFC, big UFC matchup we're going to get in November at Madison Square Garden. I'll be in attendance thanks to my great friends there at SeatGeek, everybody. So whatever you need in the ticketing space, head over there and utilize my promo code WARDY10 for 10% off, as well as Mantis Sleep. Head over to mantisleep.com and use my promo code WARDY. That way you guys get 10% off the best sleep masks in the game today. Thank you guys so much for hearing out our amazing sponsors. Now let's get into exactly where this reporting initially stems from today. And as I mentioned, from Robert Murray at Fansided, came out with the following piece, which is MLB free agency bid board, best fits for Tucker, Schwarber, and everyone else there in the free agent market that is obviously significant, and players that are going to be connected to also big market teams. And when getting into said players, he did make mention of Pete Alonso, as well as Edwin Diaz, guys that he could still see coming back to the New York Mets as potential best fits, which is obviously encouraging to see for someone like Robert Murray, who's in on the know here. But when we look at the external options that the Mets currently have and the mix for them to consider, we have talked about every single player already here on the platform over the past couple weeks that we're going to do right here, right now. But now we actually can talk about this with at least some level of substance, having an MLB insider like Robert Murray connecting two into one here. And let's start out of these three players in no particular order. Let's get into the one that we know has obviously been connected to the New York Mets, and this has been going on for a little bit of time now, but for great reason, and that is the big bopper deemed by many as the left-handed hitting, yes, you heard this correctly, Aaron Judge there, according to MPP fans there in Japan, and that is going to be, yes, everybody, Munetaka Murakami. Now, Murakami, who we have broken down the platform already twice, if not three times this year, and for great reason, including a video that dropped here in the platform not all that long ago over the past week or so, so make sure to check out that respective content. But to further continue the conversation on Murakami, let's get into it, because Munitaka Murakami is deemed by many as someone who is a lock to land with the LA Dodgers. The problem that I see with that, however, still understanding that, yes, this is a Murakami that obviously doesn't hate the idea to play with his good buddies there, that being in one Shohei Ohtani, Roki Sasaki, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, all guys that he won gold against Team USA in the 2023 World Baseball Classic for Team Japan. Having said that, Murakami is deemed as someone who's going to go to not only potentially the highest bidder, but the best fit. And while there is a reality that a Max Muncy could be leaving the Dodgers organization this offseason, which would making adding a guy like Murakami more feasible, as of now, there still is not an overly realistic option for Murakami to be an LA Dodger, and here's why. Murakami, who, as you guys can see from the stats down below, and this was as of the past couple of days, so if they're off by a game or two, I apologize. That's just because I literally just made this graphic a couple days ago to update it, rather. But he's going to be posted by his team there and Yakult there for Japan and the MPB, and he has been the best home run hitter consistently over the past 5+ seasons, as now a 25-year-old, mind you. But Murakami added to say the LA Dodgers, well, who's their DH? It's a guy by the name of Shohei Ohtani. Oh, who's their first baseman? Oh, it's a guy by the name of Freddie Freeman. The point stands. Murakami, who has actually had 20% plus of his reps in the season thus far at first base, is more than likely going to profile solely as a first base DH type at the major league level. His third base is so bad, it makes Mark Vientos look like a platinum glove out there. And I'm only half joking as I say that. The bar is very low with Murakami. No one is expecting him to transition to be a Major League Baseball third baseman because he just isn't good enough to be one. And at first base, it appears that he may very well be a liability in that regard. So Murakami, where does he profile best as DH as of now? And should that hold true and stay the case, there really is not a feasible fit for him with the Dodgers. So what does that mean? He's going to go on to the big market, that being the Big Apple. And as we saw from Robert Murray's reporting himself, connecting the dots, the best fits in his eyes, and this is obviously educated back belief. This is not just throwing something on the wall to see if it sticks. He has the New York Mets and the New York Yankees as he best fits here for Munitaka Murakami. And the Yankees is not surprising. We know that the Yankees, even with Giancarlo Stanton, they still can make room for someone like Murakami, especially with the uncertainty of Cody Bellinger on if he's going to return, for example, as Belly has played all over the place, first base, outfield, you name it. And yes, they have Ben Rice, who can obviously handle first and DH without a problem, but Murakami would thrive with that short porch, that goes without saying. And he's someone that has been on record while speaking to local radio there in Japan over the past couple of years that if there is a team that he would consider on the East Coast right away that hits his dome right away, it would be the New York Yankees, which isn't surprising to hear because that's Dodgers and Yankees are the first two teams you always tend to hear with these Japanese players, unless your name is one Kodai Senga, for example. Shout out Billy Big Bucks. If you know, you know. But Murakami, who has been just utterly dominant every single year that we've seen for the most part in the MPB. I mean, if we go all the way back to his 2019 season as a 19-year-old, he had 36 home runs and 96 RBIs. Fantastic stuff. Then we look at 2020 and 120 games because he still had, roughly full season that year. Pandemic going on or not, did not stop him from playing there for the most part in the MPB in Japan. And he had 28 home runs, 86 RBIs. You get to 2021, we see, 39 home runs, 112 RBIs. 2022, 56 home runs, 134 RBIs. 2023, 31 home runs, 84 RBIs. 2024, 33 home runs, 86 RBIs. And now 2025, 22 home runs, 47 RBIs, and counting. Murakami, who has, is basically a career 270 average hitter and has had a slugging over 550 for his career, including a slug that's north of 700 so far this season. There's no doubt that he will be able to provide his power at the major league level. Where there is doubt and concern with Murakami is twofold. It's one, the complete lack of ability defensively for the most part, and two, knowing that this man is going to strike out an absurd rate. Currently, he's striking out at a high rate. He had 180 strikeouts in 143 games and 610 play appearances last year. He had 168 the year prior. The year before that, 128, so not as bad. But over the past couple seasons, he has really been a strikeout machine, which is one indirect hand as to why he went from being more of a north of a 300 hitter that we saw in the 2020-2022 seasons to now a guy that's falling more in the 250 to 270 range because he's swinging and missing at an alarming rate. That is only going to increase once he hits the major league level because MLB pitching is obviously a step ahead of the best that you're even going to get in the MPB with all their splitters and all. So expecting an adjustment period with someone like Murakami, I'd imagine that he's going to put up solid numbers, but not necessarily jaw-dropping numbers in his first year at the major league level. So why do the Mets make sense? If you're looking for a true left-handed power DH to add this lineup, who you could add for the next 5+ years, and that he's going into his age 30-31 season, how can you go wrong if you're the New York Mets? I understand David Stearns is prioritizing team defense, but how about we actually prioritize a consistent DH for a change when the Mets have been simply incompetent in that position since its start of being universal back in the 2022 season? Yeah, I think we're over the Darren Ruffs, the Daniel Vogelbachs, or the initial J.D. Davis, Dom Smiths, or the most recently going on in the Jesse Winkers that simply didn't work out, and, the bloops and the blasts of the Starling Martes. Not that Marte's bad, but it's like, like between Vientos having not enough consistency and looking more like a trade chip than someone the Mets view as someone that they want to move and build with in the future. And I'm not saying that I necessarily wish it. I'm just saying from what we've seen at this point, it makes it abundantly clear that if you're not going to rotate options at that DH, which I know Stearns may like the idea of, I just hate it. I don't think the team flexibility of that DH spot should be utilized in said area. I think it really should be utilized in power, because outside of Kyle Schwarber, who is another huge lefty bat that can make this team better, not named Cody Bellinger as well, it's someone here and Munitaka Murakami. And Murakami would probably do wonders in this Mets lineup, even when having heavy strikeouts, because he wouldn't need to be the guy. Imagine a world where the Mets ran it back with Pete Alonso and had Murakami. Now, I can see while defensively that could cause greater issues for you, but Pete just needs to hold his own and be competent at first. We've seen him do it, but he has fluctuated a lot defensively the past couple years for the Mets, and that goes without saying. So, for the Mets, when you look at big bad options this offseason, if you really want to go all in on a high upside batter, the best slugger that we're potentially seeing since Shohei Ohtani left for the States, going all the way back to 2017-2018 range, Murakami may very well be that guy for this Mets team. And let's not forget that David Stearns himself scouted Murakami in person back on August 12th of this summer. And in the one game he attended of Murakami, he had a walk-off home run to win it for his team in Yakult. So you can't ask for anything better there for Stearns to see firsthand as Mets president. And we know that the Yankees, the Dodgers, and a lot of other teams will be nipping out the heels for Murakami's services. So it's a wait and see to see exactly how the bidding war is going to go, what the posting fee would look like for someone like him, for how much a team is going to initially invest in him, and ultimately the kind of contract length and AAV a guy like him is going to get for the Major League level next season. But Mets fans, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Are you for or against Munetaka Murakami being potentially best fit for one of the Mets or the Yankees getting into next season? Because now, as we pivot away from one of the best home run hitters, if not the best home run hitter we've seen in the MPB for the past 5-6 years, let's now pivot away from him to now getting on to a pitcher this time, everybody. And that pitcher is going to be, yes, one Framber Valdez. And I am excited to break down Valdez because we've already talked about him to a degree on the platform, going back to a live stream over this past week with my good buddy James Shiano, that many of you guys know here in the Mets and baseball community. And, you know, Framber Valdez is one of these guys that I don't hate the idea of, but I absolutely hate the idea of Framber Valdez, depending on how much the Mets are actually having to give up when it comes to contract length. That is going to be the big bugaboo with someone like Valdez. It ain't going to be nearly as much of a concern about what you're getting him for his next couple seasons, but rather, what are you going to get in Framber Valdez if you have to invest in him on 5+ years of a contract? And that is something that David Stearns most certainly does not want to do. And I do not anticipate that he will go 5+ years for Valdez, which is what makes him as a best fit option, according to Robert Murray for the Mets, all the more interesting. Valdez is coming off of another very much prototypical year, and I realize I have a comma there instead of a decimal point. I apologize for the 3.66 ERA, the graphic down below. But how he performed this year is nearly identical to how he's performed for his career norms, as you guys can see the side-by-side from 31 starts this year, just under 200 innings for the veteran southpaw, multi-World Series champ with the Astros, as we know. 3.75 expected ERA, a 3.37 FIP, a 3.66 SI ERA, a 1.2 WHIP, just under 190 strikeouts, a roughly just under 9 strikeout per 9, and right around a 3 walks per 9. Career stats in over 1,000 innings, 3.36 ERA, 1.2 WHIP, 3.6 SI ERA, over 1,000 strikeouts, and an 8.8 K per 9 and 3.2 walks per 9. Literally smack dab on the money. A lock to be a 4 to 5 WAR pitcher pretty much every single season. Framber Valdez has been a workhorse. He has been a man that is one of the most surefire guaranteed things that any team signs this offseason for an ace caliber starter. And yes, Valdez paired with Noah McLean, paired with all the high upside that the Mets will have in their pitching with their youth movement next year, can do fantastic things for them. And I really think that the Mets could get great things out of Valdez. But here's where I have a concern for the New York Mets, and it's twofold. It is one, contract length and contract AAV. Really, contract length. I could care less if the Mets gave him $100 million next year if it's short-term contract that you know it's not really going to hurt them in any which way, shape, or form. But length is where we have an issue, because if you're Framber Valdez, even though you're 31, entering your age 32 season, a little bit older than Max Fried, just a smidge, You see Max Fried get 8 years, $200 million to the Yankees this past offseason. You, of course, are at minimum looking for a 6-year contract. How can you not be, right? And if you're not, then you're getting creative about maybe significant player options. But you also know and are cognizant that the CBA is up after the 2026 season, and there's a great reality where we could have a full lockout for at least the entire offseason heading into 2027. And with a lot of uncertainty as to how contract and payout structure will be once the next CBA is finally negotiated and handled down the line in the next couple of years, until then, there's a lot of uncertainty as to what players will be getting dollars-wise. And I think we're going to see a lot of players really try to pounce and maximize their biggest deals yet. And Valdez is right in the peak prime of his career to do exactly that and get what he's looking for this time around, and that is probably a long-term deal elsewhere. Now, there's another factor that concerns me about Valdez outside of the long-term aspect to a contract, which I do not see David Stearns doing, point blank. I think if the Mets get someone like Valdez, it'll be more favorable, more of a Sean Manaea type contract, but insanely high AAV for the first couple of years that the Mets really try to maximize on. And that's where it could really sway him and make sense to bring him to the Big Apple, a championship type pitcher, a man who knows how to win. And if we take a look at how Valdez has pitched, he's averaged he had 200 innings in 2022, 198 in 2023, 176 last season, 192 this year. I know he isn't getting younger, but Valdez has been a workhorse each of the past north of 5 years now. That should tell you exactly what you're getting someone like him who has been nails each and every year and has stayed so consistent when looking at the K to walk ratio and the home run rates for the most part. But the other big concern for me, and this might be controversial, but I know I'm not the only one that feels this way, is how Valdez would grade out with his body long term. Because I really want to know for Framber Valdez how he goes about his makeup as someone who's obviously going to continue to lose more and more velocity as he gets older, more than likely. He does not give off the makeup of someone who's going to be able to sustain this and age well as he then gets into his mid to late 30s. And that is my bigger concern as well. I get similar vibes of Framber Valdez as I do with Frankie Montas. And I don't have that in the sense of what their track record has been, because Montas has been injury prone galore. But I do get the concern in the sense that, Montas, when I look at him, I don't look at him and say, oh, this is an uber athletic pitcher. I look at him as someone who probably needs to put a bit more work in. Cue Anthony Recker calling out Alek Manoah, confidently about how he should be in the gym a little bit more. A couple years ago on MLB Network, shout out to Rec. You guys know, a former podcast co-host here on the platform. And since then, Alek Manoah has struggled to at all be a major league caliber starter in today's game. And I'm not saying that is the same breath I'm putting Framber Valdez in. All I'm saying is if you're going to have a long-term investment for a starter like this, I want more certainty as to how their health is going to look down the road. And while the track record's been great, the track record is kind of irrelevant and reaches a moot point when you're focusing on what he will be doing moving forward for you versus what he has done. And the final thing, if we want to add a third option that also has me with a level of concern with Valdez, is the trend we have seen with Astros pitching over the years. The Astros have a tremendous pitching lab. I'm not saying the Mets can't get the best out of their own pitching. I know you could laugh at it now because a lot of things went wrong for their pitching this past year, but it was injury-backed more than anything. But how many times have we seen pitchers outside of like a Garrett Cole, who's more of an anomaly, for example, because he's like and maybe Valdez does fall in this category, so maybe I should lump him more with him than anyone else. But we've seen a lot of pitchers over the past 4 or 5 years that have left the Astros organization and just not be the same pitcher elsewhere. And that's one in direct hand because they thrived in the environment in Houston and their ballpark, as well as really taking advantage of how their teachings were. Once they left that organization, went somewhere else, even when they had good labs, didn't necessarily amount to the same success. I'm just concerned because for Valdez and how good he's looked on paper, he gives off a vibe to me as one of the pitchers that's going to look great on paper, but then just have a completely different second half of his career. And I hope that isn't the case. I don't wish that to be the case. And I do hope that if the Mets land someone like him, then he can come in and be an ace caliber star for this team. But as crazy as it is to say, and I like Valdez quite a bit, I think he's one of the nastiest free agent options out there. I'm going back to my video that I did north of 2 weeks ago here on the platform, which is the following. I firmly believe it's in the best interest of the Mets to acquire starting pitching this offseason through the trade market probably, that it will be free agency. Because free agency is going to have inflated contracts, It's going to be hard to get guys on short-term high AAV deals, barring changes, obviously, because who knows what exactly is going to happen here. A lot of time up until these signings actually happen. But the trade market is where things are more fascinating. The trade market is where you can find some guys with some more control and some more unique contract situations, instead of having to automatically invest at minimum 5, 6, 7 years into a starter that you probably otherwise don't want to, even if you have the confidence that a Steve Cohen can eat that contract comfortably in the final 2 or 3 years left of the deal, should, say, a Valdez or someone else that the Mets may acquire in this year's free agent market age like milk after, say, his first 2 or 3 years look otherwise solid in Flushing, Queens. But Framber Valdez, definitely want to know if you're for or against him in the comments down below, everybody, and thank you guys kindly for that. Now, last but not least, when we talk about these options for the Mets, the best fits for them, that are external fits at least, let's go on from talking about Framber Valdez to talking about the guy that I know that you've been more curious and more intrigued than ever to talk about. I say that half jokingly, and that's going to be, yes, Mr. Trent Grisham of the New York Yankees. Now, let me make something abundantly clear. Do I like Trent Grisham? Yeah. I don't really have a heavy dislike with Trent Grisham. Do I think Trent Grisham can be a fit for the New York Mets? I absolutely do. After taking further thought and while having proper discourse, even on X this past day, with my good friends there, that being and guys like Michael Marino, among others, do I think that there's a world where, especially a Trent Grisham, just doesn't make sense for the Mets? Mainly because of the fact that the New York Mets would have to give up a draft pick because the Yankees are going to throw a qualified offer on him? Yeah, that's where we can already put a halt to this. And I'll be the first to say that. As someone who's been advocating for Trent Grisham, as someone who's by no means opposed to adding Trent Grisham, I will tell you right now that the New York Yankees attach the qualified offer to Trent Grisham. That alone will more than likely be the reason why the New York Mets do not land Trent Grisham. Secondly, Trent Grisham, because of the breakout year that he had, taking advantage of the short porch, and honestly, just a very good year. If he was at Citi Field all year, everybody, he would have had over 25 home runs. So really isn't that far off from what he did with the Yankees. And at Yankee Stadium, he wouldn't have even had 30 if he played every single game at Yankee Stadium this year, per Baseball Savant. So he actually took advantage of ballpark dimensions, both home and away this year, even though he did a good job with the Yankees. I also believe that Grisham, given the fact that he had 34 home runs, 74 RBIs, and helped a Yankees team in the big market and thrived as a 30% above the average player that can play multiple aspects of the outfield, even though his defense has definitely been suspect the past year and a half at least, we can all agree that he's more than likely going to get more than a one-year contract. And that, too, is where I could see it being a problem for the Mets. It's not just the qualified offer with Trent Grisham, it's the multiple years as well. And it's a stupid Artie Moreno ran LA Angels team away from giving a dummy contract to a guy like a Trent Grisham, and that it never even getting close to being where you were hoping he would be, because you bought in on one breakout year when Trent Grisham is just not this player consistently for you. And I also sincerely apologize for the lag if you guys are getting any of that in the recording right now. Got a lot of things running at the moment, but the point stands here with Grisham. Great season with the Yankees, but first year with the Yanks, very limited sample size, so I'm not going to factor that in. But last time that he had at least 500 plate appearances was with the Padres in 2023, and he had 13 home runs and 50 RBIs and batted just under 200. He was batting a .184 in 152 games in 2022 with the Padres. It's interesting, it was 17 home runs, 53 RBIs, but Grisham's been basically a 15 home run per year hitter, less than half of what he did this past year for the New York Yankees. So, do I think Grisham could take advantage in a deep lineup like the New York Mets? Absolutely. I think Grisham could have a very productive year offensively for the Mets and bat, right around the same average probably. Maybe a little high, a little low at times, and still give you a player that's going to be at least 3 WAR, hopefully. Defense is where you get some fluctuation in center. Tyrone Taylor's the better defender between the two, but no doubting that Grisham would be quite the bat upgrade and would get a lot of pitches to hit by being in such a deep lineup with his former teammate of the Padres going to the Yankees, that he himself was a part of that trade a couple years ago with, yes, Juan Soto. So you could rekindle those relationships as well, something that I'm not opposed to. And the Mets certainly need outfield help right now. And I think Grisham is just a perfect stopgap for Carson Bench. Carson Bench, I think, is going to run away with the Mets center field position at some point next year. I don't know if it's going to be right away. I hope it's right away, and I really think that there's a possibility that he doesn't have spring training. But in this scenario where he doesn't, and maybe it looks underwhelming, and maybe the Mets just aren't feeling overly comfortable there, you want more certainty at center field than the nonsensical platoons of Tyrone Taylor and Harrison Bader before Bader became what he blossomed to be for the Twins and the Phillies, of course, this past year by swinging harder and swinging faster. It's as simple as that. You also look at the outfield configuration with Jose Siri, injury plagued, and then when he was out there, he was electric, but for more bad than good reasons, sadly. David Stearns has proven to not hit the mark with what the Mets need in center field. And what the Mets need is a perfect stopgap for Carson Bench. If there's a role where Trent Grisham somehow doesn't get the QO and you can get him on 1-year deal and somehow pitch him to be here, then by all means you do it. I also don't hate the idea of investing multiple years on Grisham if the QO isn't attached on, say, like a 2-year deal with a 3rd-year option, and he's someone that fluctuates as your 4th outfielder. Should Carson Bench thrive? And I think that could really work. I think Grisham is a guy that could be perfect for you off the bench, hitting some big pinch hit bombs for you. I don't think that's really far-fetched from happening. You're not going to get high contact from him, but that's not what you're looking for either. And you're not looking for him to be this, home run king every time out there, because you're going to get in other aspects of your lineup, but hopefully with not only another great Juan Soto season, Lindor being Lindor, Nimmo hopefully finding a bit more consistency in his game with the home run power staying true, and a Pete Alonso reunion barring changes. This is a guy who I could definitely see thriving this time with his crosstown rivals from the Bronx, this time in Flushing, Queens, with the New York Mets. So Mets fans, let me know your thoughts on if you're for or against Trent Grisham, as he is a potential best fit for the New York Mets among some other teams. I do know that regarding Robert Murray's reporting, the other best fit team he had for Framber Valdez was a team that does make plenty of sense, but are they going to spend the money? Well, I'll have to see to believe it, and that's the Baltimore Orioles. We'll see if the Orioles will actually do that for a change instead of just letting, like a Corbin Burns walk after you invest in him on the final year of his contract. But Mets fans, that is going to do it for our video. I would like to thank you all so much for watching. If you found yourself enjoying, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on your way out of here. And if you want to check out Robert Murray's piece of Fansided in its entirety, I will have a link down below in the description for you guys to check out whenever you wish to do so. Thank you guys again for watching. Be on the lookout for more things Mets all throughout the offseason here, every single week on the WardyNYM platform. This is your guy, Wardy, signing out. Peace out, folks. Let's go, Mets.